CQDX, CQDX, CQDX. This is Havana calling. CQDX, CQDX, CQDX. This is Radio Havana calling all shortwave listeners and radio amateurs. Welcome to... DXers Unlimited, Radio Havana's weekly feature dedicated to the fascinating world of radio communications.
Hello, amigos. Welcome to this special edition of DXers Unlimited that was recorded several days in advance because at the time you are listening to the show, I will be out of town. I'm your host, Arnie Coro, Radio Amateur CO2KK, and as always, it's my great pleasure to share with you Radio How-related information on the air and also on the World Wide Web from www.radiohc.cu. And here is now item 1 of this special edition of DXers Unlimited. A ham radio operator who also listens to this program using a transistorized regenerative receiver wrote the email I'm going to read right now. He says, Arnie, I heard your broadcast on L-type antennas and would like to get info on the one you were describing being fed at 20% from the end. Believe you were using also elevated radials too. I am a DXer on the 40-meter band, CW, and wonder if this would help me as I will be using only a sloper at this moment. Please, any help or information would be much appreciated. I also listened to the show in which you described the Japanese hen antenna. A very rare antenna indeed. And by the way, I have been listening to DXers Unlimited lately on my homebrew solid-state regenerative receiver. Also wonder if you can describe the latest receiver you talked about recently that was built by your grandson using a 24 volts DC power supply. Now here is the answer to the questions asked by this longtime listener of Radio Havana, Cuba. Dear amigo, the L antenna that I described in that DXers Unlimited program is actually an array of 4 parallel connected L antennas designed to be used by low-power AM broadcast stations that usually operate above 1200 kilohertz. It is an omnidirectional antenna system that very closely matches the performance of a full-size antenna, and of course, a much more costly antenna and environmentally non-friendly, ugly-looking quarter-wave vertical made by using a tower radiator. These L antennas are low profile. For DXing on the 40 meters, the 7 megahertz amateur band, the slopers are an excellent choice. Sloping dipoles, especially if you can install 3 of them using a single mast. There's even a more complex design for slopers using 5 slopers spread at exactly 72 degrees intervals and using a complex switching system that makes the unused ones act as reflectors for the one that is designated as the active antenna. By the way, this system, although rather complex to install, as I said, and requiring the use of several high-quality radio frequency type relays, they're costly, was shown in practice to be second only to a 4-element full-size 40 meters band Yagi placed at no less than 40 meters. That's a full wavelength above ground. And one important thing to learn about sloping dipoles that is often overlooked by radio amateurs is that if they are fed directly with coaxial cable, you have to be really careful. You have to follow my advice. My way of doing it is to use a 1-to-1 balance transformer, balance to unbalance transformer, so that the coaxial cable outer braid will not radiate and thus distort the vertical radiation pattern of the sloper antenna. One interesting finding that came out of my experiments with half-wave dipole slopers was that adding a 3 or 4, 5 quarter-wave radials at the end, at the ground end, using them as radials as a counterpoise after the end insulator of the sloper, this was a very good idea that I copied from a Russian antenna design of many years ago. A 20 meters band sloper with a 3 ground counterpoise quarter-wave elements spreading out provided wonderful DX from Europe when I installed it at my previous QTH with the antenna aiming and sloping down at 45 degrees azimuth. It was a lot of fun to observe how my sloper gave better signals in Europe than a friend of mine, 3-element full-size Yagi. He was really amazed with the performance of the sloper. My friend said that my antenna was involved in some kind of witchcraft I had done to it, but that was not the case. Pure science. No, the witch doctor, yours truly, demonstrated to him that his full-size 3-element Yagi was just too close to the ground to be able to produce the required low takeoff angle that is required for DXing. Later, I added another 20-meter sloper beaming to Japan through the short path or propagation, and it also worked very well indeed. In my opinion, the sloper half-wave antenna is the lowest cost, more effective and easy to install and to tune antenna for the frequency range between 7 to 21 megahertz, where it can be installed with practical dimensions. And I know in advance in which direction you need to aim in order to add more DX entities. Then you can know where to point the low end of the sloper to. Now, summarizing, a question: is your 40 meters band sloper fed by directly connecting the center of the coax to one side of the dipole with the braid to the other? That's my question. If you are feeding the sloper in that way, it will never behave as a real sloper, and the radiation pattern will not be what the coaxial cable braid will produce, because it will certainly be contributing significantly to distorting your antenna's radiation pattern in the vertical plane. You do need to install the balun at the feed point. Many of the visitors to my amateur radio station, after listening for a while to my homebrew Super Islander Mark V single-band transceiver, go back home with a set of circuit diagrams and photos loaded to the USB flash memory pen drives that every person seems to be carrying around these days. Many of the visitors will return sometime later to ask questions about how to build the rig, and sometime later, further in the time, I may be able to establish a nice 40 meters band two-way contact with those who have built this hybrid transceiver that is among the most popular rigs built here in Cuba for the past several years. I will be back in a few seconds after a short break for a station ID. I'm Arnie Coro, Radio Havana, Cuba's host of DXS Unlimited. This is Radio Havana, Cuba. You are listening to a special edition of the program DXS Unlimited, and here is now our next Radio Hobby-related item, amigos. Sure, your Radio Hobby-related questions and comments, as well as new ideas to make DXS Unlimited a more attractive program for the world's Radio Hobby community, are much appreciated. And you do receive fast and comprehensive replies from me, directly, immediately. Now, answering one. The Super Islander version 5.0.1 solid-state receiver project is now completed. Among the features of this easy-to-reproduce design is that it does not, and I repeat this, it does not use any rare or hard-to-find electronic components, something that very often is the big stumbling block when someone attempts to homebrew a radio and then finding out that the designers had included one or more very hard to find or also very expensive parts prevents the completion of the project. Among my main sources of electronic components nowadays, I have said this many times, are the complex fluorescent light bulb circuits, computer power supplies, TV sets, fax machines, motherboards, and also radios. Yes, radios that do not enter into the collector's item category, and they can be taken apart for parts. The Super Islander direct conversion solid-state receiver formed part of a more ambitious project, a single-band 40 meters ham transceiver that may be built either as a totally solid-state radio on the 10-watt power output class, or can be part of a hybrid transceiver that uses vacuum tubes for the driver and final amplifier stage and can produce up to about 50 or 60 watts into the antenna. Now, amigos, my apologies today because this program was recorded well in advance of it going on the air, and for that reason I was not possible to include at the end of the show, as usual, Arnie Coro's DXS Unlimited high frequency plus low band VHF propagation update and forecast. See you at the next edition of DXS Unlimited. Bye-bye.
And that's all for today. This is Arnie Coro, Radio Amateur CO2KK, your host here at Radio Havana's DXS Unlimited, saying 73 and very good DX.